right, people, I got another one here for you. I got an El Camino. I forget the year, so my apologies on that, but this is a female customer of ours. She bought the audio equipment beforehand and reached out to us. We want to take a look at everything, see what she wanted to do, and said, okay, we'll try to make it happen for you. She also purchased some new replacement carpet we're going to add to it as well. Told her we would do that. Not a problem. Throughout this process, we try to help people along with certain things just to try to make their dollar stretch a little bit more. A lot of these older cars are kind of cobbled together. We take a lot of pictures. Anything that we can fix that we can, we try to. Other than that, we let the customer be aware of what's going on. A lot of standoffs in this car, a lot of bolts, screws, washers, just to get the seats mounted. Again, we're not a restoration place, but we try to adjust, at least let the people know we're trying to make it a little bit better when we go back with it. Started by removing everything we could. Seats first, and we jumped back on the factory speakers in the back, got those out of there, ripped out the carpet. A lot of it was screwed to the floor, and I've come across that quite a bit, but it was a lot of screws off in there. Once we finished that up, we went ahead and cut all the pieces, get them prepped and ready, and we can start the assembly process. It's always the same in the shop: 1 5/8 coarse wood screws, 100% glue coverage, and adjustable clamps. Here we're tying the bottom and the back piece together. Get that coverage in there to make sure we get that solid bond. Some screws will hold it into place to assure that. Once we get the bottom, the back, and the sides together, we'll start on the transmission hump layout. I usually like to build it first, attach it, and then router it out after the fact. Here I am marking and pre-drilling the screw holes so I don't miss when I start assembly process. You can see that there. Once we get it secured in place, we'll get ready to start working on the port. This one's going to be a little bit different. We had and took the two port side pieces, rounded off the back sides to help with the airflow on the insides. Here you see me rounding off the bottom also, which it'll make more sense once I attach these two port pieces on here. Just again to help with the airflow. Only sanding with the port opening will travel over. Once we get those in place, get creative and kind of help secure it. Clamp it, make sure we get that even pressure throughout, screw it in place. And then once I remove it, you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. The port's on top, transmission hub's on the bottom, and you can see the back end for the smoother airflow. Flipped the box over, took the jigsaw, roughed everything out, then I finished it off with the flush trim bit on my router. Next, we went ahead and masked everything off. Just going to paint the port opening. It's not really going to be able to be seen once it's in place, but I build them and I paint them for whatever reason, just to make them look good no matter what. Whether it's seen or whether it's not, I know it's thorough and clean throughout. Flipped it back over. We're going to add the top piece on now, secured it in place, and then we can get ready to mark and tie in the top. Now they went with 10-inch subwoofers here. This box is 8 inches, so we got to add a riser for extra magnet clearance, but also when we do the subwoofer cutout holes, we're not hitting anything. So put the face lift, if you want to call that, it's about a 2-inch spacer on there. Built it, attached it, secured it in place. Now we have enough space to drop the subwoofer in for the subwoofer cutouts and also for the flush trim later on. And it was just a process I thought about after the fact, and it made more sense once I started going through with it. Just getting everything secured, clamped into place. Securing certain pieces in place using pocket hole screws, which you can see there on the bottom right. Now we turned our attention to the port area, just repeating the process. Steady walking all the way around, getting that level up. You can see here my thickness wasn't there, so I had to add a 1/4-inch hardboard piece in between, which actually added 2 just to get my thickness to keep the inside diameter of the port true. Next we stripped down some thin 45s, so we're going to add to the tops and bottoms where the subs will be sitting, just to help with that airflow, minimizing as much turbulence as we can. Back and forth on the sanding with each layer. We got to sand down, try to keep everything nice and smooth. Here you can see I got a small taper from the top to the bottom. That's because my top and bottom pieces of my box was not true. I had about 1/8 of an inch overhang on one side, which you can see here, but we got a trick for that. Some homemade wood filler, sawdust, and some glue. Mixed it on up, compacted it into those gaps, pressing them in there, because if it does draw up as it dries. So we're just kind of doing a lot of overkill just to minimize that. Just come back with the hand sand. If the hand sander don't take care of it, we'll hit the orbital sander, get everything knocked down smooth. While that was drying, we went ahead and outlined the front baffle piece. So when we come back to it, we know our screws won't miss and they'll line up perfectly. And here we go, hand sanding it back and forth, just kind of working it, getting it back smooth as we can. I was using 1680 grit sandpaper. Like I said, when my wrist got tired, couldn't mess with it, broke out the orbital sander. You can see it taking shape. Adding those layers to help with the mounting depth of those subwoofers. Did a couple of test fits, and the box was still hitting certain areas, metal brackets for where the spare tire was, even some of the insulated styrofoam. But I try to minimize what I take out each time, just so I'm not completely gutting the car. But in this instance, I couldn't get around it. I had to remove all of that stuff just to get the box to slide in. But once I got it all down, it slid right in there. It was level. I thought I was going to have to add spacers to level everything out, but it sat in there smooth, slid down there, nice and easy. Mounted to the lower part of the frame of the vehicle, which the way the seats taper gives us more clearance. All right, now we can jump back on this and get ready to attach that front baffle in place. I remember outlining everything earlier. It makes it easier when we go back and put these screws in place. Routed out my portholes, transmission areas, flush trimmed them. Now we're going to work on the flush trim for the subwoofers here. Just clamped it into place and just repeated the process. And while we have the flush trim piece clamped into place, we'll go ahead and drill through it plus the baffle to mount the subs. That way when we cut these holes out later, everything will align. Here I am double checking the mounting hole cutout plus the OD of the subwoofers before I end up cutting the router on. That should be the mounting holes for the subs. Got that one done, and then did the flush trim on the table, secured it to the table, and then cut those out. Now everything will line up when we put everything back together. Use that 100% glue coverage as always, and then to secure the baffle piece in, we just use brad nails. And with each layer, we're steadily sanding. I think I've said this earlier on, I did account for the extra layers going into this port, so don't think that I didn't. Those were all calculated in there for the port length. And there's no real technique that I use for sanding. You just get in there and start sanding. I use 60 grit, 80 grit, 120 grit sandpaper, just getting lighter and lighter, feathering it on out when I start to get that finished look that I'm looking for, that feel, smoothness. And that's basically the structure of the enclosure built. Now we'll go through and add some rigidity to it, add some 1 1/4 inch wooden dowel bracing just to try to help stiffen everything up. Here I'm squaring everything up with the speed square, lining everything, outlining with the pencil, drilling them through the top, through the inside out. When I put them back in place, I can just run my screws up and I'm not having to guess if I'm hitting the dowel or not. Everything will line up automatically. Cut some 45 for some corners. Screw and glue those into place just to kind of help that airflow, minimize the turbulence. Drilling out where the subwoofers will wire in. That's what these holes are for, and just kind of color coded those for my future reference later. This area won't be seen once the beauty panel is put in place. Here I am start adding spray paint layers on it. And while that's drying, I'm bouncing back and forth. Now I'm going to start working on the speaker pods. Customer said that I can get creative with it. They didn't have any dash speakers in this one, so I said let's create some pods for your lower kick panels and just try with some fiberglass. I'm not a fiberglass expert. This was actually my second job, so I cut them a real good discount just for my learning ability and then seeing, how well I could get this going for them. Use some 3/4 inch MDF for these pods to be able to mount everything to it. And I think initially I protected them with that painter's tape over the original lower quarter pieces there. So when I start messing with this fiberglass, I'm not damaging the original pieces. Just to give me an outline, a layout of how I want it to look. Added some foil, minimizing the fiberglass, getting all in the vehicle. Just trying to contain all of that because this stuff is messy. Get the rough layout, then start marking things out with a marker, peeling the tape off, and then kind of seeing, going back and forth, in and out, the look I was going for. It was rough getting it off of there, but I ended up getting them off of there. It took me a while without cracking it. So now that I have these structures here, I'll just start, like I said, sanding, marking, cutting, and then I get these pieces on here so I can hot glue them in place, start getting my angles together, the look that I want to go for that would fit. The e-brake on the driver's side was still not usable, which I called the customer and he said, don't even worry about it. She don't use it, so just put it in there. So I tried to get it in there as slim as I could to get it out of the way for obstruction. But that's what I ended up coming with, was that look right there. So I went ahead and removed them back out. Added some extra layers because the speakers that they had were a little deeper. and they were touching the back of the fiberglass. So I put some spacer rings in it, just kind of spaced that out, give me some lift. Once I got that on there, wrapped it in that fabric, pulled it tight, secured it in place with hot glue, then went back in, added some more foil. Now I'm going to add my resin. Once this hardens out, then I better pull it back out and I can work it from the table versus inside the vehicle. But again, that foil is just to minimize mess is all I'm trying to do in the vehicle. Now they've got a hard and thin shell. I'll go through and add another layer and then added fiberglass. And I just keep fiberglass, and you can see the discoloration. Those are the air pockets in the back, which wasn't critical for what I had going on, but I still kept layering over it, thickening it up. Even though the pockets were there, I couldn't get rid of those. And just sanding and working them and sanding them, adding layers, trying to just get that rigidity in there for me, trying to smooth out any imperfections or any hard dips that I had. I was just adding resin to it, coming back with body filler and just steady working. And again, I'm not an expert. This is my second job ever messing with it. So I'm taking my time, and I'm probably overdoing a lot of stuff, but this was my process. I'm using that, not body filler, I forgot what that was called, but fill it in little pinholes is what I was doing with that. Sanding it, primed it, and then it showed all my little pinholes left. And go back and keep adding that filler in there with it. Glazing putty, that's what that stuff is called, glazing putty. Shout out to my guy Sprayway Customs for all this stuff. I learned all this from watching his videos, so much respect, man. And there's rattle can spray, that was about as close as I could get to match the color of the vehicle. I just had to, I think we did 3 layers of paint, 2 layers of clear coat. That was the finished product as it was drying out. Again, not perfect, but man, it worked, and we got vocals in the right place for them now. That was the whole point. Now here I'm starting on she asked me could I do a center console or a console for cup holders to hold her Pepsi and her bottled water. I said, well, we don't normally do it, but I'll give it a try. She said, go for it. We're gonna love whatever you do. I said, okay, we'll just see what comes up. So starting with this 3/4 inch MDF, getting the angles for that transmission hump, kind of back and forth, messing with it until I got something I was comfortable with, which I'll go over with a beauty panel layer just to kind of fill in any imperfections and dips that you really won't see. This is just the main structure of it, trying to get it rigid and solid for what I'm trying to do, and I'll build off of it, but still keeping it sleek. It's not bulky. You know, I always try to do that factory custom look. You know, they didn't want nothing fancy, no LEDs, nothing like that, but that's the structure. That's kind of how it's going to look there. And I'll build and add the little thin panels on it to smooth everything out so it flows better. Cutting ridges where I can tuck my fabric later. That was that cutout you saw in there. That's that 1/4 inch MDF or hardboard. This is what I call the beauty panel pieces that'll go over it to give it that sleek look. And to get it in there, I had to do it in 2 pieces because it wouldn't fit off in there with the angles of the hump plus the bottom of the console up under the dash. Got them, did one, mimicked the other one to the next one, so they were mirror images of each other. Roughed them out with a jigsaw. Got them as smooth as I could and put them on the router to put those lips and edges around it so I can get the edges even and get away from that jigsaw look where everything is uniform with the little trim pieces. Run it on the flush trim bit. Flipped it over, put the rabbit edge on the bottom side, just allowing me areas to tuck the fabric. That's the whole reason, for the rabbit edges I put on these. Secured it into place because it bows in and it bows out. It's not a flat edge, so that's what the clamps are for. Added the cover, the glue on it, clamped them into place, and left it overnight and just let that glue set up to make sure it wasn't going to pop loose because I didn't want to add screws to it. And just repeated the process on the other side here. Just trying to show you as much detail as I can here. I think next day we jump back. Now we're on the amp rack. I think we're messing with the amp rack now, which will be behind the seats of the vehicle, kind of behind the headrest type area. Making brackets to mount everything into place, mount the box into place, and just kind of test fitting, trying to get the angles, the depth that I can get, so it's not touching the seat. Amps aren't touching the back of the seat when they get hot. Trying to get the most clearance I can out of that, but still making it look cosmetically appealing. Getting that little angle to follow again the contour of the seats versus sitting straight up and down at a 90 degrees angle. Get a slight tilt on it just to try to help with that, the cosmetic look. Adding my trim pieces. It's all these trim pieces here, that 1/4 inch hardboard, to help me be able to tuck the fabric later on down the line. And as you see me go along, it'll start making more sense to you. Adding these pieces in, gluing them as I go. Here I'm getting angled, got the amps dry fitted in, hold them in place, following the contour of it for each side piece to match that. Set it on the table saw on a random or a sacrificial piece to get that angle straight, trying to eliminate uneven edges with the jigsaw. Just use the table saw as much as I can. And then clamping it into place. You can kind of see it, that angle. Didn't take a whole lot off, but it was enough just to give that angle look I'm trying to achieve. Adding my 1/4 inch trim pieces in. You can see that gap, that's where the fabric tucks. The inside the area would just be painted black just to make it disappear, but the outside edges will be wrapped in fabric. Trim pieces on the side, always start with cardboard. A lot easier to cut with scissors and box knives to get the angles you're needing. Figuring out ways to attach it to the box, screwing it so everything is removable. These won't be glued into place. Get everything lined up, get my angles. And like I said, it was a lot of back and forth, but that's what it takes on a lot of this stuff, especially if you've never done it. I've never done nothing this extreme on this an El Camino myself. Trim pieces, covering up areas, blank spots, so they're not just exposed. Just the little detail stuff makes these builds go a long way when you're custom fitting them in like this. Pre-marking them so I don't forget and put them backwards on opposite sides. Now we're going to work on the beauty panel for the subwoofer side, where the floorboard and transmission help and all that stuff. A lot of this stuff was freehand, back and forth jigsaw, messing up, changing this out. And that's just what it took to try to get that fit and look I was going for. Cutouts for the subs, cutouts for the port. Again, rabbit edges for wrapping the fabric. Little pieces and gaps, filling in as I went. And again, I'm bouncing back and forth. Now I'm trying to figure out mounts to mount this cup holder in place now. Double checking my screw holes, bracing. And now we're back. I did a first coat of paint, flat black paint on the inside of the amp rack. The bottom of the floorboards on both panels was rotted out pretty bad. Again, I'm not a floor man. I don't cut the stuff out and put a new floor pan in, so I had some extra fiberglass left over. And decided to go ahead and put a layer on there to seal it on up, stop that moisture from coming in from the bottom. Again, temporary fix. We're just trying to help out where we can. Next, we decided to run the power runs for each amp, starting from up under the hood, running it down below, going in between the quarter panels and coming up from the bottom of the vehicle. That's how we do 90% of all of our power and ground runs, is to the frame through the bottom versus inside the cab of the vehicle. Using these rubber bushings and grommets to help prevent the cables from cutting and splicing and grounding out. Walling them out, pushed them in where they kicked out right. Seeing some nice tight water fit. Next is secured them into place using some zip ties. Again, doing all this laying on our back, so bear with me. Got them shot and secured into place. Went ahead and covered them up with some split loom. Just some added prevented protection. Get it looks good up under there. Get that black on it, just kind of just disappears. Continued running loom all the way up to the front as well. Jump back on the inside of the cab, securing it in place with those little brackets, just so that the cables don't move, slide, or pinch or nothing like that. They're just locked into place. All of our ends are heat shrink, ground, sealed up, and soldered. Now, did the same thing on the other side, so now we're behind the driver's side, just repeating the steps. These are for the grounds. The passenger side is the power. The driver's side is where we're gonna run all our grounds. Coming through the frame, using self-tapper screws, grinding out the metal paint and rust, and then coated them up with some fresh paint to kind of seal them over to prevent corrosion. Here we are testing all of our RCA cables before we get to running them. Making sure they're, checking each probe, making sure that there is continuity, because you don't want to run them all and then turn around and you got a bad one. You got to take it all back out after you done got them all tucked and hidden how you want them. This is routing behind the amp rack, so nothing is hanging or dragging, because I've got power wires running in and out left and right. Just trying to secure that everything is in its own location and its own path. That's kind of how we're doing this. You can see here, got a piece of wire running through that little dead pocket space back there behind and above the cubby there. And so that's where I ran the powers through there, and the grounds for the amps like that, because there was hardly any space behind that amp rack, and that cover board right there was real tight. So I had to use that again, call the customer and made sure it was okay before we did that. We went ahead and mounted the crossovers for the door speakers, or the kick panel pods, sorry about that, inside the cup holder, the console area. Kind of help tuck and hide that away. Got the wire wheel, stripped out all the little grime screws, getting prepared for this carpet. Patched up anything with some aluminum tape, kind of seal up any of the million. It was 1,000,001 screw holes we had to take out of there. That's what that tape was for. Let the carpet air out overnight, stretch out in there, try to get as much of the wrinkles out as we could. What we couldn't, they were just there. We did some spray adhesive, the kind of two-part contact to kind of help lay it down as we went in there, and just kind of manipulated it and rubbed it, and just got it to conform as best we could. Now we're gonna turn our attention to these subs. These are some monsters. These are priced insanely cheap, and these subs are heavy. Here you can see how we're gonna wire them down to 1 ohm on this amplifier. Is running a SCAR amp on this one, so we're gonna tie them together. The speaker terminals are so big I can split the jacket and run the wire all the way through. These are some heavy gauge, well-built subs. I can't knock them for that. But that's how we did this, and so we don't have multiple wires connecting and twisting together. Just one continuous run is how we chose to do this one. And there's the cover piece. It'll go over that once we wire everything together. Yes, I used wire nuts on this. Don't freak out. I've used them before. Your electricians do it. I mean, it ain't nothing gonna happen. I've done it several times, so don't worry about it. We got this covered. Wrapped it in the wire nuts in that fabric just to prevent vibration and tapping up against the bottom of that box. Once we got it all tucked in there and ran, put that cover piece on and blocked it in, now we can start putting these beauty panels on. As you can see, they kind of fit together like a puzzle piece. I love it when they go like that. We just shot them into place with some brad nails. You can see the angle there, everything, the gapping for the fabric. Kind of see it coming together, painted it black. You see how it fades away, didn't need to wrap it. You won't even see that once we put the amps on there. Now we're gonna turn back to the cup holders for this console, getting them all marked out, using what we have around the shop that kind of fits it, old spray cans. Use the jigsaw, cut them out, popped in there, keep them just a little bit tight, but we know we gotta put fabric in it, so we just make we have enough slack in it. A little size comparison there for your visual aid. Always gotta keep a cold Shasta and a water bottle in there, in your refrigerator. All right, head unit, start messing with this. Old school to new school. Look at the EQ on that rascal, on that 2 knob. I wish I could get it to play, but it wouldn't come on for me. So we're gonna start marking out using the original dash bezel, mark it out to fit the new style pop-up screen. Jigsaw and Dremel tool. Kind of took our time with it, get it to fit. That piece with the arrow did not come with the kit, so we had to make that spacer for that. It had to give us enough clearance, but when that head unit popped up, it cleared the controllers above it. Without that, it would not fully erect and pop up like it was supposed to, so we had to make our own. I think it was 1/2" MDF is what I took on this one. Kind of put some edges on it, get that blocky style out just to give it a little bit of flair, you know, a little contour, make it look, you know, more eye candy for them. But just to give you that look, all it is a spacer piece. That's all I'm making this for that right there, just to clear those controllers, because without that it would hit those controllers, even that top outer trim piece where it's kind of sunk in. So that's the original bracket there, marked it out for just support to help hold the head unit in place. Went ahead and get the Dremel tool as well, got it knocked out. Reusing, I like to reuse a lot of what we have, you know, so we're doing less damage, trying to keep it as much OEM as we can. Hit it with some flat black, then went back with some gloss black, sanded it, and then a couple of layers of clear coat on it in between as we were letting the paint dry. Do some test fit and pressing it into place, make sure everything locks in like it's supposed to. Kind of give you a visual aid of what it looks like, just what we were going for, and it worked out pretty nice. We were real happy with this one. Didn't tell the customer about it until they came, and we kind of walked through showing them that. Now here I'm showing you we need to have some back support, so we get take some of the pressure off the front end. So I had to make a support bracket that slid in behind it up underneath that metal tray. That's what I was showing you there. So that's what the reason for the wedges and that 1/4-inch hardboard. And I painted it, didn't need to, but I had to paint out, why not? Now you can kind of see it. Now we got that back end support so the head unit doesn't sag, or it won't sag. And secured it into place with a couple of screws. Again, this won't be seen once we slide that console into place. Lock it in with some tabs. You kind of see it blends in even, so that metal will slide right across and be nice and sturdy. Mashed everything off. We're finna start putting some spray adhesive down and wrapping this the back of the bar, or the beauty panels up. This is the fabric we went with. I couldn't get anything closer to what they had, so we just kind of made do with what we could get hold of, and it blended pretty nice. And once we got it all in there, it turned out real nice. We were real excited about it. Kind of give you that finished look there. Stand back on you. Yeah, not too bad. It's not perfect, but it's not too bad. That turned out real nice. Amps wired in, mounted into place. You can see that contour, how they kind of flow together. Next, we'll go ahead and get the subs wired in place, mounted in, and step back and see what we look like. Oh, that's a good. I love the way this is turning out. Love the way the visual on this is turning. Everything kind of flows together. Looking really good. All right, we're gonna repeat the process and get this console mounted up. Again, 2-part contact. Both surfaces let it air out for about 60 seconds and start wrapping it. And you can see just adding that little 1/4-inch hardboard pieces gives it a little depth. That factory custom, something subtle. It's kind of what we were going for. We definitely like the way it looks. Turned out real nice. And we'll continue right along wrapping and get these top 2 corner pieces done to seal off on both sides of that amp, on the amps of the upper corner sections. We secured those in place with some brad nails. Once we got those shot in, we just kind of roughed up the fabric to kind of hide the nails. Once we did that, it kind of went away and you didn't even notice they were there. Man, turning out good. Loving it. All right, next we move the lower dash piece up under the steering wheel so we can go ahead and mount the bass knob in place. Nothing fancy, nothing crazy. Just want to make sure it's secure in place, not going to back off over time and fall out and be an issue. Once we got that mounted, reinstalled it in place, and then we're going to go ahead and jump up on these speaker pods. Wired up these component sets and installed the pods in place. That, again, I always got to go with that factory custom look. They there. And just for you knowing, no, the e-brake or the e-brake does not work. We went ahead and checked with the customer ahead of time just to make sure, and they say no, we don't even use that. So we were able to put those pods in there like that. Wired up the component sets and we hid those and mounted them behind it underneath the console, just for a cleaner look. Customers not into all the gadgetry and stuff like that, so kind of keep everything stealth and functional. We'll go ahead and address the main battery cable on here. I believe this is the factory when it came with the car. I'm not for sure, but we went ahead and upgraded and replaced it with a newer style similar to it. A lot of you guys may cringe on it, but if it works, it works. You don't have to go get the high-end stuff, and a lot of our stuff is on budget around here, but we make sure it works. All copper ends on all my Big 3 upgrade, soldered and grounded out. Buffed away any paint to the frame. Upgraded some brass terminals here. Battery post extensions, I'm sorry. And we went ahead and wired everything into place, loomed it. Like I said, did the Big 3 upgrade for them. Secured the individual runs for the power to each amp. That's how we do a lot of our installs versus teeing them off. They each have their own individual run to the battery. Big 3 to the engine block, loomed up, zip tied, so everything kind of disappears and is tucked and out of the way. Now we'll go ahead and get this head unit installed, old school flip up style. Not many of y'all have seen these, but these were real popular back in the day. Getting everything lined up, set out. Some double M, 3M tape to secure the front, that spacer piece to the back of the main bezel there. You see that spacer is real important. It clears the cigarette lighter, clears the thermostat controls, and it clears the recess of the overall bezel in there. So it was very functional, but it was necessary. It's the factory plug to the back of the head unit. We ohmed and metered out everything, the connections, figured out which ones we need to tap for the constant 12, for the accessory 12, ground, and so forth. bottom of that dual head unit to give you the schematics of it. Don't even need the manual. Here we use the line out for the rear left and right for the sub inputs, and we went ahead and did a LOC for the front speaker pods. Once we got all that stuff wired in, wired up, and in place, you can see the gapping in there. Yeah, everything flows good, and that's it. That is it. Everything is in, buttoned up, and they are good to go. This was one for the books. It pushed our outer limit, pushed us out of our comfort zone, but that's where you grow. That's where you grow. You got to get that, try some things, and I love customers like this that allow us to experiment and try different things at no cost to them. So it's a win-win for everybody. Seats are pushed all the way back, not touching anything back there. That way you get full motion of the seats. No matter if you're short or tall, you don't have to worry about touching nothing back there. That way you're not riding uncomfortable. Like I said, always build your system around your car, not your car around your system. You'll enjoy it way more. But overall, clean look, sounds amazing. If you want to hear it, you got to go to Instagram. We don't get any copyright issues on here on YouTube. But thanks for watching. I really appreciate you. All I can tell you is we got more coming. I got more coming. Stay tuned.